With 26 Grammy Awards and a voice that seemed almost untouchable, Alison Krauss looked like an artist who could go on forever. Then, quietly, she began to step back, and the silence felt louder than any standing ovation. Fans wondered if fame had finally taken its toll, or if the industry had asked her to become something she refused to be. But the truth behind her pause isn't about burnout or scandal. It's about authenticity, loyalty to her roots, and a choice that changed everything. Alison Maria Krauss was born in Decatur, Illinois, to Fred and Louise Krauss, into a household where creativity and discipline quietly coexisted. Her father, a German immigrant who arrived in the United States as a child in 1952, built an academic life teaching his native language while earning a doctorate in psychology, before later shifting into real estate. Her mother, of German and Italian heritage, came from a family of artists and worked as an illustrator for magazines and textbooks. The two met as students at the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, and after Alison's birth, they settled in Champaign, where she grew up alongside her older brother, Victor. Music was present in the home, but never forced. Louise played banjo and acoustic guitar, filling the house with folk melodies, while the radio brought in pop and rock. Songs Alison absorbed casually, from Gary Numan's Cars to bands like Foreigner, Bad Company, and Electric Light Orchestra. Victor gravitated toward piano and double bass, eventually carving out his own path as a jazz and rock multi-instrumentalist. At 5 years old, Alison began classical violin lessons at her mother's encouragement. Practice didn't always come easily, but she stayed with classical training until age 11, while also throwing herself into roller skating and sports before ultimately choosing music over a potential roller derby future. Her turning point came almost by accident. In 1979, her mother spotted a notice for a fiddle contest at the Champaign County Fair and bought a bluegrass instruction book along with duets by violinist Richard Green. Alison learned the tunes by ear, including Tennessee Waltz, practicing with her mother accompanying her on guitar. At just 8 years old, she entered the contest in the novice category and placed 4th. The experience sparked a deeper fascination with bluegrass, and she quickly developed a rare ability to absorb complex riffs by ear and reshape them into something distinctly her own. By her early teens, Alison was already performing regularly, fiddling and singing with Marvin Lee Flessner's country dance band. In 1983, her parents bought her a custom, adult-sized violin, an unspoken acknowledgement that this was no longer a hobby. At 13, she won the Walnut Valley Festival Fiddle Championship and was named Most Promising Fiddler in the Midwest by the Society for the Preservation of Bluegrass in America. Publications soon took notice as well, with Vanity Fair calling her a virtuoso before she was old enough to drive. Around 1984, at one of the same bluegrass festivals that had shaped her early rise, Alison met Dan Tyminski. Those gatherings would quietly become the foundation of her future, as every eventual member of Union Station first crossed paths with her there, long before the world would know the name Alison Krauss. Beyond her solo work, Alison Krauss built a lasting musical identity with her band Union Station, a group that grew alongside her career rather than being assembled later for success. Together, they recorded 7 studio albums, with Paper Airplane in 2011 standing as their most recent full release. The bond between the members was forged early, long before fame entered the picture, at bluegrass festivals hosted by the Society for the Preservation of Bluegrass in America. It was at one of those festivals that Krauss met Dan Tyminski when they were both still teenagers. Tyminski became a permanent presence in Union Station, known not only for his musicianship, but also for his voice. Most famously heard on Man of Constant Sorrow from the film Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Their partnership reflected Krauss's instinct for loyalty and long-term collaboration, values that would define her career. Because she began so young, Krauss reached milestones that few artists achieve at any age. In 1993, at just 21 years old, she was invited to join the Grand Ole Opry, making her the youngest member of its roster at the time. Even more remarkably, she became the first bluegrass artist in 29 years to receive that honor, an acknowledgement of how profoundly she had already reshaped the genre. Her influence continued to be recognized well beyond the bluegrass world. In 2012, Berklee College of Music awarded Krauss an honorary doctorate of music, placing her alongside fellow honorees the Eagles and Mulatu Ostatka. Berklee cited not just commercial success, but enduring artistic influence, recognizing Krauss for contributions that had quietly but permanently shaped American and international music. Then, almost without warning, she stepped out of sight. The golden girl of bluegrass, the artist who seemed incapable of missteps, began to fade from public view. At first, the absence felt explainable. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe she had simply grown tired of an industry that never stops demanding more. But as months stretched into years, the silence became impossible to ignore. Interviews disappeared. New releases stalled. Even those closest to her chose their words cautiously, hinting at struggles without naming them. What no one understood yet was just how deep the fracture ran. For Alison Krauss, the gaps between records grew heavier with each passing year. Some described it as a hiatus, others as a retreat, but neither captured the truth. Something inside had shifted, and it refused to settle back into place. The joy that once came naturally now felt complicated, even fragile. She sensed it herself, that even silver linings seemed to arrive carrying shadows. When she eventually re-emerged, those around her noticed immediately that this was not simply a return, but the beginning of a new chapter. Even her brother remarked that it felt like a different era, not just for her, but for the band as a whole. The reason behind her withdrawal wasn't scandal or loss of ambition. Pressure had been part of her life since adolescence. Labeled a prodigy as a teenager, she learned early how to carry expectations quietly. Her fiddle lines were unmistakable, her voice instantly recognizable. Awards came first at small festivals, then on national stages. With Union Station, she didn't just succeed, she reshaped the sound of country and bluegrass, opening the door to a broader Americana audience. Soon, she became the voice producers requested, the collaborator other musicians dreamed of, the standard others were measured against. The industry closed in, eager and relentless. Touring became constant. Her days blurred into rehearsals, interviews, and long stretches of highway between cities. On stage, she gave everything she had. Off stage, the fatigue slowly accumulated. The pressure became mental as much as physical. The feeling that if she tried today, it might never sound as good as it could tomorrow. Those around her noticed the change. Her laughter softened. Her responses grew careful. Even her music began to reflect a longing for stillness, for space, for breath. At the height of her success, she appeared untouchable. She had won more Grammy Awards than any woman in history, collaborated with legends, and delivered album after album without a misstep. But beneath the surface, her body was already sending warnings. It started subtly. Exhaustion that wouldn't lift. Headaches that lingered after the lights went down. Then came the blow that changed everything. Her voice began to fail her. Diagnosed with dysphonia, Krauss faced the unthinkable, losing control of the instrument that defined her life. Notes no longer landed cleanly. Confidence wavered. Singing, once instinctive, became risky. Doctors ordered silence. Performances were canceled. Schedules were wiped clean. The unstoppable momentum came to a sudden halt. Forced to step away, she entered a silence that was not just professional, but deeply personal. The voice that had carried her since childhood, her greatest gift, now felt uncertain, even unreliable. And for the first time, Alison Krauss had to confront who she was without it. Those closest to her watched the change unfold slowly. The boundless energy that once carried her from stage to stage was replaced by caution and restraint. Every choice felt loaded. Every attempt to sing carried the risk of disappointment. She was suspended between memory and fear, between what her voice once did effortlessly and the possibility that it might never return in the same way. The fight became constant. Nights were spent oscillating between hope and frustration, and there were days when even speaking felt dangerous. At certain moments, she realized that everything had shifted, that life itself no longer looked the same. By then, Alison Krauss was no longer fighting simply to preserve a career. She was fighting to protect the very thing that had shaped her identity since childhood. The industry noticed her absence immediately. Her retreat sent ripples through music circles, prompting speculation and quiet concern. Fans wondered if she would ever come back. Rumors filled the void. Burnout, tension within the band, creative fractures. What none of those headlines captured was the daily reality of rehab, discipline, and starting over from the beginning. She returned to learning with the humility of a beginner. Specialists were consulted. Vocal coaches guided her through unfamiliar territory. Progress was slow and unglamorous. Each exercise demanded focus and patience, each day a test of resolve. Some days ended with nothing but frustration. Other days a single clean note would emerge, small but powerful, offering a fleeting sense of hope. The climb back was deeply isolating. She watched the world continue without her, other artists touring, recording, stepping onto stages she had once filled. Public appearances became rare. Her voice, once everywhere, went quiet. For Krauss, the silence was both healing and painful. She missed the shared breath of harmony and the electricity of an audience, but she refused to risk returning before she was ready. If she came back, it would be fully, or not at all. The retreat forced her to confront more than physical limits. Isolation peeled back layers she had long kept protected. Old insecurities resurfaced. Her perfectionism, once the engine of her success, turned into a source of doubt. Every plan was questioned. Was there still room for her in a fast-moving industry? Would people remember her voice, or only the version of it that existed in the past? To outsiders, the silence looked intentional, even strategic. Behind closed doors, it was anything but peaceful. Stress, longing, and uncertainty filled the quiet. Friends and family stood by her, offering reassurance and reminders of what she had already accomplished. But the final decision could only be hers. The industry does not slow down, and with every year away, the risk grew heavier. She wanted to return on her own terms, but those terms, shaped by her own unforgiving standards, were the hardest ones to meet. Behind the scenes, everything moved at her pace, or not at all. Alison Krauss would listen from the very beginning to the end of a piece, and if she couldn't hear it fully, clearly, the way she imagined it, she would start over. Nothing was rushed. Nothing was picked up halfway. Precision mattered more than speed. Meanwhile, Union Station carried on as best they could. The band members pursued side projects, toured separately and recorded with other artists, but they all understood the truth. Krauss's voice was the thread that held everything together, the irreplaceable heart of the group. When you have a voice like that at the very center, everything else depends on it. They respected her struggle and gave her the space she needed, even as the weight of waiting settled over them. Fans reached out quietly but persistently, sharing memories of concerts, favorite songs, moments when her music had carried them through their own hard times. The world moved forward. The music industry shifted. New artists emerged. New trends took over. Yet her absence left a space that nothing quite filled. Every so often she would appear briefly, a single performance, a quiet collaboration, small signals that she was still there, still trying. Each appearance sparked hope and fresh questions. Was this a return or only a visit? The answer always seemed just beyond reach. Reclaiming her voice required more than physical recovery. Krauss had to rebuild trust in herself. Vocal exercises became daily rituals, almost meditative in their repetition. Mornings often began in silence, followed by patience and discipline so intense it would have broken most artists. Progress came slowly, almost imperceptibly. But over time, her voice began to return, not with the effortless ease of her early years, but with something deeper, shaped by struggle, restraint, and humility. She listened more carefully now, attentive to every breath, every note, every emotional shift. Gradually, joy found its way back in. Writing songs stopped being about chasing flawlessness and became an act of honoring survival. She chose collaborations carefully, making sure each one mattered. Music was no longer about keeping pace with industry demands. It was about personal truth. She understood that returning would mean more than singing again. It would mean standing in front of the world as she was now, marked by scars, and trusting that it would be enough. Then came the moment that changed everything. One morning, Krauss realized the fear no longer ruled her decisions. She had waited long enough. The world had changed, and so had she. Her voice wasn't exactly the same, but it was hers, strengthened by patience and shaped by pain. She reached out to her bandmates, and together they began again. This was never about reclaiming past glory. It was about gratitude, for the music that still waited to be made, for the audience that had waited with her. Recording sessions were intense, sometimes emotional, always honest. As the new work took shape, Krauss found herself laughing more, worrying less. The first rehearsals felt like coming home. The comeback was no longer a question. It was real. Fans would soon understand that the long silence wasn't weakness. It was a battle only she could fight. The return of Alison Krauss was never a simple story of disappearance and revival. It was a hard-won victory, carved out of loss, uncertainty, and the slow work of healing. She could have stepped away forever. She didn't. And the real reason she returned wasn't fame, pressure, or nostalgia. It was the rediscovery of the one thing she had nearly lost: the music itself.